That's all I can say is I kept hearing, you need to go to register 4. And when they announced the register, they said, register 3, no 4. So I walked to that register, and the woman, I saw the wisp too, and she was crying, and her eyes like were so full. And I'm thinking she's the cashier, and she kept saying she was sorry. I said, no, 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 it's fine. And I could see her son, but she just kept apologizing. I said, no, no, no. She goes, well, I said, he's right here. It's fine. And she just started to cry. And it was really her son.
Her son had just passed away, you're saying.
Her son had died of a drug overdose. And I had heard in line, not that the son died of a drug overdose. I had heard that I'm going to go to a woman.
Welcome to What the Fuck Just Happened. I'm your host, Liz Enton. If you listen to the intro, you know my story. If not, here's a brief summary. I'm a sciencey skeptic, and when my dad died, I took a shot in the dark and decided to investigate if there was any possible evidence of an afterlife. I assumed that was as realistic as Santa Claus, but I was desperate. However, I was so blown away by what I discovered that I wrote a book and launched this podcast. In this podcast, I will be talking to some fairly normal people about some really weird shit. I speak with everyone from psychic mediums and afterlife researchers to ordinary people who've had some inexplicable experiences. So come, listen. There's no need to draw any final conclusions. Keep an open mind and wonder, what the fuck just happened? Hi guys, I am talking to Deborah Friedman today. She is a friend and a medium, and she can introduce herself much better than I can.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Liz. It's Deb Freeman here, and I'm from Connecticut, Glastonbury, Connecticut. And let's see, how will I introduce myself? I am an evidential psychic medium, and which has the doors have opened up the older I've gotten and through life's experiences. So I'm so glad to be with you tonight, Liz.
So glad to have you. So let's dive in with some questions.
Perfect.
First of all, I'm so curious. Tell me, how did you know you were a medium in the first place? When was your first experience with it?
I've always had, I didn't understand and I never knew the word medium until I was probably, honestly, in in my 30s. I heard the word medium, but I always, so knowing, they're two separate things for me. Being able, from my understanding that I was never alone, to understanding, um, as I went through life and experiences and happiness and trauma and the ebb and flow of life, I'll say it. Intuition was always there. Um, Psychic ability was always there. I always knew I wasn't alone since probably the age of 4. I knew that there was a presence beside me.
I'm going to ask you more about that because I don't really know what that means to know you were never alone.
Oh, okay. So, how I knew I was never alone when I was little, in my earliest recollection, and it wouldn't be someone like an imaginary friend I would play with. I always had a presence, and how I understood it then was a security of warmth, of a presence of a being beside me. And how I can explain how it felt was when you were little, and if you'd go up to your grandmother and you just know that warm feeling beside her, or she would give you that gentle hug and that truthfulness. And I just knew I was never alone.
Like you'd feel that sort of energy around you the way you feel when you're.
Correct. And I wasn't brought up in a religious, spiritual, I wasn't brought up, we were loved to our parents' best ability, but it wasn't in a nurturing, caring, loving, supportive environment. It wasn't a coping environment either at that age because we were little and we just didn't know any better. But I always had a sense of not being frightened, knowing some presence was with me.
And did you ever know who this presence was? Did you find out, was it like a grandparent or someone, or?
Nope, nope, I didn't know, and that goes into the experiences. Just so to understand my journey towards understanding that I am a medium and what I can, how I can be present for spirit and here, is it developed throughout my life, and it just was a door that kept opening and opening. So I identified it the first time I really identified it more than just a presence was I was about 8 or 9 years old. I think it was closer to 9. And I had almost, well, I had a near death experience. I should have drowned and I didn't. And I felt that same warmth, presence help me then. And by moving me, I was completely caught underwater under a dock without anyone realizing I was under there. So that was the first time, and I identified it. I think I thought of it as a protection as a male.
What do you mean it moved you? Like you felt it physically move you, as if like a human hand grabbed you or something?
No, I wasn't grabbed. I grew up in Burlington, Connecticut, and there was a town recreation center, and um, it wasn't uncommon. Like we grew up, and I would take my horses and pony at the time and just ride for hours and hours. We'd ride our bikes. We weren't tended to the way my husband and I supervised our children. It definitely was a different time. It was the 70s, almost the 70s. I was born in 64. So I was about, I'm pretty sure I was 9. And the reason why I say pretty sure is because when it happened, um, I was swimming. I went to swim lessons. So you drive your bike a couple miles down the road, you go to the wreck, which was a pond. They had a big flotation raft, which was made of like thick styrofoam, and they framed it out. And then they put like that astroturf over it. So it was like green. And they anchored it with cinder blocks on a long chain. And it would shift, it would move, but it pretty much was always in when you went on, they had like a sand area, but it would be across the pond, man made pond to the right. It pretty much stayed there and it was very deep out there. And so I had gone for swim lessons that morning and I went swimming afterwards. They had open swim. And so you paid, I don't know, 75 cents or so. And I was there by myself, which wasn't unusual. And so I went on the dock. I jumped off swimming. I got back up. I went on. I jumped again. And then I realized I went down very deep and it was dark because it was a man made pond. It had mud bottom. I realized the dock was above me and there was no air. And I remember thinking, okay, this isn't good. But I wasn't frightened. And I didn't have burning. I didn't have choking. I didn't have panic. I knew it wasn't a great situation. I was like, oh. But the next thing I remember, I was being moved by it, and the pond was cold. I had warmth around me, and I was shifted because there was no way. And the only thing I saw underneath there was a yellowish color, like I can't even say it was a light or a bright light, but it was a yellow color. I truthfully don't know if it was because I couldn't tell the corner, but I don't know if it was because it was sunny that day. I don't know if it was like a reflection or what it was. And I was moved. The next thing I knew, I was in the water next to the side of the dock. So my head was next to the side of the dock. And I reached up and I held onto the dock. And I thought, I heard everybody laughing and playing. And I heard like the lifeguards. And I was like, why isn't anybody helping me? And I waited like a minute or two. I swam because it was deep over. I was tired. And I don't even know how long it took. And I just sat there for a little bit, dried off, and rode my bike home. Now I know what it was. I didn't understand what it was, but I wasn't afraid. And I knew that not to say everything would be okay, but I just knew I wasn't alone. That's the only way I can explain that first near death experience.
And was it a typical near death experience? It wasn't in the sense you didn't leave your body and see what was happening. You just knew it was like steps before that and you felt protected.
Yes, I should have, looking at it as an adult, I should have drowned. There was no way I should have ever come up from underneath there. Eh, So Um, no, I've astral projected before. I did that when I was giving birth to the twins. I raised above myself and saw myself. I saw the top of my husband's head. I saw him lifting me up from behind. I gave birth naturally. And I was in an operating room, but I gave natural birth. And with, then the other time this is before I knew. You got to remember, that was in my early 30s. Is that what I was? Must have been, I think I was 28, 27 or 28. And I had had a ganglion cyst on my right wrist. And they had put me to sleep to do my wrist. And, they strap you down. And I remember seeing them shaving my left wrist, and I was above quickly. It wasn't like I was lingering. Sometimes people say how they were above watching the whole thing and went here and there. It wasn't like that. I went up above and I saw them shaving my left wrist, and I yelled out, right wrist. And then I remember seeing them put something over my face, which I assume was to put me to sleep more. And that was all I remember seeing of that. And then when I woke up, they had said, the nurse said to me and the doctor came in, like, boy, did you have a dream? And I said, I didn't have a dream. You were shaving like the wrong arm. And so they're like, oh, you remember that, huh? I said, yeah, I saw you. And they just looked at me and I didn't realize what I had said. That was another time.
Because you were under anesthesia when you saw them.
I was under anesthesia. Yeah. Yeah, but I must have yelled out for them to ask me if I had a dream. And my left wrist was shaved. When I yelled out right wrist, it was because I was watching them shave my left wrist.
Right. They started shaving the wrong wrist, which was the
Yeah,
left.
yeah.
And both were shaved. So you got evidence and they backed it up. And you were under full anesthesia.
I was out. I was supposed to be out. And yeah, so that one, my other near death experience.
Wait, you've had three? Well, I guess that last one wasn't a near death. That was an OBE, an out of body experience.
No, that's not a near death, and neither's the birthing. Yep, for the with the birth. But yeah, no, with the other one was this one. This one was scary. I was on my sister's horse that's 17 hands, and we used to board it down at a farm.
What's 17 hands mean? That's how big the horse is?
That's how high the back is. That's very high. Like a pony is, I think, 11, 10 to like 13 hands, maybe 12, 13 hands. And then when you get above that, that's the height of the base of the back of a horse. So a 17 hand horse is really big. So anyhow, he was trying to drop the bit and he was backing up, and I was out in the pasture. I was near the barn and there was ledge there, and the owner was trying to discipline the horse, which he shouldn't have. And he came up behind and he smacked him in the back where their kidneys are, on their hind. And the horse reared up, fell over backwards. I was riding Western, fell over backwards on top of me, and was just picture a horse on its back and twisting to get up with the legs all in the air.
Poor horse. What a horrible horse owner, too.
Yeah, oh, he wasn't the owner. He was just the barn owner. He was horrible. Yeah, it was awful to do. And the horse was a rescue that was abused by men. The guy was just not a nice person. So up and over the horse went on top of me. I landed on ledge. I didn't have a mark on me except the bruise from the pancreas, from bruised pancreas from the saddle horn, but I felt the same warmth around me, beneath my back, behind my head, cradled my head, because it was pretty violent when the horse reared up and then fell over on top of me. I didn't fall off. I remember leaning forward and hanging on to his mane and the reins and the horn, and the horse coming toppling because I was hoping, it would fall forward again and land on its 4 feet. But it went up and over on top of me. And so beneath me was ledge, was all rock. I didn't have a scratch on me. I felt the same warmth feeling that I felt in the water around me. But at that time, I was frightened. I was crying after that one. I was more like unaware with the first one. With this one, it was frightening. It was in slower motion, but what protected me was that same presence. I should have been dead in both times. Landing on rocks with a horse that weighed, oh Lord, I don't even know how much the horse weighed.
You kind of sensed this presence was around you. And then you also then moved on to become a psychic medium. When did you start noticing you were getting information about other people?
Okay. I always had, it's kind of like, it'll sound like we're jumping a little bit, but I'll try to streamline it. So that was, I started to get psychic information and not understanding where it's coming from. I understand now that I have spirit guides. I believe they're angels. I believe my loved ones. I also believe that we're here in other planes, and I identify eternal life as heaven with God, and we're one of one. Everybody, respectfully, I- everybody is here to have their own journey, their own path, their own understanding. And I'm not here to preach one or tell somebody something except for what I identify for myself, which is for me. I respect everybody's experience and their journey. So when I reference of source, of God, of one, I that's for me personally. So I would always know things. I would always know how things would turn out. I always knew how not to be in a situation. I knew when something was positive. I could tell when someone was truthful. The intuition has always been so on point. I then psychically would know who was going to, how they say, who's going to call, who's going to do this, who that. I would know the outcome of some things. That as I immersed further, with the child care center, I had 120 students there. I had 25 staff
So you
members.
owned, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, a NIAC accredited child care center. So I'm with a lot of people there. I was always open to, when I was younger, I saw spirit, and I didn't understand why. It sounds disrespectful to what I did, but I was a child. I was driving my bike everywhere. I'd go from Burlington to Canton to Unionville to Collinsville. I would ride my bike or my horses down to the river in Harwington. I'd go pretty far. So I snuck into the funeral home. I believe it was a Hearns funeral home in Unionville, and there was a neighbor that had passed away, and I didn't know them, but they were having a wake, and I was riding my bike, and I remembered another neighbor mentioning it, and I wanted to go in there, and I didn't know why I wanted to go in there, but I wanted to go in there, and I kind of quietly just went in. It was like an older funeral homes then used to be like looked like an older extended home, and so I went in and I was curious. I had no business being there. And I remember thinking, well, he's not dead. Why does everybody think he's dead? Like, I knew we didn't die. That was another thing. As I got older in my 20s and my 30s, people that I loved, like when my grandmother passed, I knew she was still alive. And I was more upset that it was winter and her body could be cold in the ground. And I remember holding that thought since I was about 10 years old. When they would bury people, I would think, why are they putting them there? They're not dead, but not associating that the body's the shell. I was just thinking, they're not gone. So when I went into the funeral home that time, I was there, and I didn't see like a full presence of a shape of a body. I just saw a shifting of an outline, and I knew that he was right there, still eternally living. And I didn't have the vocabulary for it then. So as I went to my 20s and I had kids and everything that and now I understand intent. And looking back, it's different. I knew if I put my best foot forward, and I was pretty much always a caring, honest person that wanted the better for another, nurturing and protective of others always since I was little, that things would turn out okay. And if they weren't, I would kind of have an inkling of how it would turn out. So I was in my let me think. I was at the court when I worked there. So I was probably in my 20s, late 20s, early 30s, and I had to have a lot of dental work done. Probably I'd say I was 28 or 29. And this is pretty strong. So I don't predict, I don't know, but in now later, for people that I've been with and somebody else and they've presented, I now know times have presented when I've known they're going to cross. Um, so I was getting all this work done and I was nervous about it. And I looked at my husband, and I had 3 little kids at the time, and I was scared to have all this oral surgery and a whole bunch of stuff done. And I looked at him, I said, what if the dentist dies? He goes, why would you say that? I said, I don't know why. I just heard it, said it. I don't remember how it came out. And Dan goes, Deb, And I said, I don't know. Okay, this isn't, and I'm not saying that I predict anything, and I'm not at all. That afternoon, the dentist fell in a pole auger and died. How would I know that on a Sunday?
And it just came to you out of nowhere,
Nowhere.
and you didn't normally get anxieties about people dying like that. That wasn't like a regular thing.
No, I wasn't anxious. It's terrible to say, but I wasn't anxious about him dying. My first thought was like when I said it, it just blurted out of my mouth. Like I heard it. He's going to die. He's dying. I don't remember the exact he's going to. And then I looked at Dan and I just said it. And he said, "What did you say that for?" I said, "I just heard it. I don't know why I said it." And he goes, "You're just nervous. Don't say that." And I said, "Okay." And then that morning, the following morning, Monday morning, I get a call at like 7 a.m. We didn't have, cell phones then. And you get a call that the dentist office is closed. You'll have to reschedule your surgery. There's been an emergency. The gentleman passed away that afternoon. As I said that, I don't know in correlation to what time, but other things, and then going forward, how much further do you want me to keep going? Like with the knowing, those are just strong, really pretty
No, I mean, I
shocking
think
things
the
to me.
evidence, yeah, if you have another, I think people never get bored of hearing the evidence, at least I don't. So
At the
I hope my
time, I didn't.
audience agrees, or they can just, I guess, won't listen to the podcast if they don't like hearing it.
Yeah, no, 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 but that's okay. Like, I would just know how, if an emergency happened, how it would turn out. I would know. Oh, I don't. Okay, so that one sticks out pretty much. And then when I went into go, okay, now we'll go forward. I'll give you another knowing. My Okay, we had when we originally opened the business, we had two couples, my husband and myself, and Andy and Angie. We own the child care center together. We opened it together. Our kids were raised together. They have four boys. They have a set of twins. We have six kids. We have a set of twins. Um, we eventually we went on vacations together. Spent a lot of time together. We eventually bought them out. Um, but we would see each other years later, like for weddings or showers or birthdays and stuff like that. But we weren't close. Angie had developed breast cancer, and it was pretty bad. And she had it from 5 years before Dan passed, 7 years before. She had it 5 years before Dan passed. So Dan passed in 2015. So she had it approximately 2010. My husband Dan passed in 2015. She had um she had breast cancer before that. So I'd say like 2010. So it'd been a couple of years. So she had done really well, and she was a survival rate of 5 years, and they thought it was behind her. My husband suddenly passed away. Then that summer, I was at an inspirational like little shop, and she just came to me out of the blue. This is how it happens. It just comes to you.
Like, when you say comes to you, you mean it popped into your head. She didn't physically like come over to you.
Yep. It no, doesn't physically come to me. But see, I had already been hearing and seeing since Dan had passed away and before that. So, I'll put Dan's passing aside for a second. So with just to make it easier with the knowing with the psychic with Angie, I thought of her and I thought I saw her post something on like, well, she was going to get like a mammogram or something, and then she posted something else and something else like a couple weeks before, and it was about 2 weeks afterwards that I hadn't seen her since Dan's, and I had had surgery in June after he passed. So it was in the summer, so it's probably July because she crossed in July. So it's probably June. And I was just thought of her for out of the blue, and I thought, let me get her something. Like I want to let her know that I appreciate, she had really reached out after Dan passed away, and I hope she was doing well, but I was just an inkling. And I said, okay, I'm in an inspirational shop. Let me buy her something. And I had truthfully forgot her address with the trauma and shock of Dan passing a lot. I was having a difficult time then. But so I texted her sister. I said, you know what? I got Angie this something. I want to mail it to her. I know the street. I know the town. I forgot the zip code and the thing. And I said, I just really wanted to send her something today. I don't know why. And her sister texted me back and said, well, she's actually in the hospital, Deb. And I said, I'm in Manchester. What hospital? And I said, can I go see her? She goes, let me check. She reached out to her. She said, sure. And I had this knowing that I had to get her something and I had to be present. and I had to be present. She didn't survive 2 more weeks. And the morning she crossed, Dan comes through as all the time as hearts, but she she came. I knew that they were going to be disconnecting her. Andy had called and he had said something, and we were crying on the phone, and I said I was so sorry, and like he hung up because he was going, to say goodbye to his wife, and the week earlier I was in the hospital, and her family's from New York, and I was sitting there, and I couldn't bring myself to go in the room. And it was the same feeling when Dan had suddenly passed. I couldn't bring myself to step back into the room. And so when I had seen her in the bed laying there, I saw something above her. So I did see something then. It felt like just a light lifting, like a wispy. I saw a wispy, and it was similar to what I saw at the funeral home when I was younger. It was similar to after Dan passed when I went to TJ Maxx, and I knew I had to go to, they call you to the register, whatever number it is. And I knew I had to go to register number 4, even though I was around. They have all that stuff so you can pick up all the extras and the soda thing. And I knew I just had to go to at TJ Maxx, the store where they kind, how they bring you down that last aisle of please spend more money. And so I hadn't gotten around the corner to see what registers are open, and I knew I would go to this register, and they called one number when I was there. I said, no, no, the other one. And I knew I was going to go to that number. And I went, and this woman was standing there, and I knew I had to go. I knew was going to meet someone. That's all I can say is I kept hearing, you need to go to register 4. And when they announced the register, they said, register 3, no 4. It was strange. And you know how it's like an automatic? I assume that they just push a button when the next register's ready. So I walked to that register, and the woman, I saw the wisp too, and she was crying, and her eyes like were so full. And I'm thinking she's the cashier, and she kept saying she was sorry. I said, no, 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 it's fine. And I could see her son, but I didn't know at the time. I hadn't, I guess, understood what I should say and what I shouldn't say to people, and how and when it should be released. You need permission. There's ethics and all of that as a medium. But she just kept apologizing. I said, no, no, no. She goes, well, I said, he's right here. It's fine. And she just started to cry. And it was really her son.
Her son had just passed away, you're saying.
Her son had died of a drug overdose. And I had heard in line, not that the son died of a drug overdose. I had heard that I'm going to go to a woman. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I didn't understand why I was hearing that. And you have to understand this is shortly.
Right. And you saw that wispy sort of.
I saw that wisp, and I also saw, yeah, yeah, and I saw him like nod. But it's not a man standing behind her. So that same wispy, and now I identify as spirit, and I can see spirit. But so above Angie, I saw that. But you got to remember now, this is trauma. My husband just died. I spent raising our kids together, caring for 100 kids with her. It was very intricate. Um, and I'm placed where I'm supposed to be placed. And that's the biggest blessing is I realize that there is no coincidence. Synchronicity is, and being where you're supposed to be and crossing paths, and it's purposeful, it's predetermined and predestined, and you might not understand it as you go through life. So when I saw Angie and I saw the lifting up, I couldn't go in the room. And when he had called me that morning, the next morning, um, I had I was sitting in the living room here, and I looked out my door, and I'm in a new, not a new house, an old house. Our whole situation changed financially before Dan had passed. And so anyways, I'm looking out the door, and there's a robin feeding twin baby birds right in front of my door, which they shouldn't have been on the lawn that little. And so because I was crying, because we have twins. I associated as Angie has twins. I have twins. It was a comforting thing. And then there wasn't a TV on, and I have a picture window behind me, and I was crying because Andy had just, I'd hung up with him, and I saw a shape of an outline of half a heart, and then I had seen, and Angie comes through to me as an angel wing. I saw an angel wing and a heart cross over. I thought I was, I'm holding my head and I'm looking and I'm crying. And I was, I knew, I looked at the clock. I got the time. I don't know why I got the time. They called me later and said, "Can you please go?" And they live in Enfield. "Can you please go out?" The older son. And I said, "Sure," because they had twin boys that were a year older than my youngest. And I went out there and I remember standing on the front porch and I was just trying to be present, like something of a consistent, but their family was there and we weren't really close, I would say, like in each other's lives, but it her older children, her older boys I'd known since they were infants, but and the twins too, but she had already left the child care center when the twins were born, but I would see them. So anyways, I'm standing on the front porch and her sister just shook her head and she goes, "I cannot believe," I think it was like at 9:47, I forget the number. She goes, "I can't believe at 9:47 I almost passed out. I had to hold on to the side of the house." That's the time I saw as they presented. Had I understand at the time what it meant. She would always call my husband Sparky, and it's not polite, and I know, but they would joke back and forth because he blew up the gas grill and blew his eyebrows off, and she would always try to feed him Polish food, and she, he'd call her Polak, joking, and she'd say, "Yep, you're never going to eat as good as a Polak." So it was so they had a wonderful relationship, and it makes sense, complete sense for him to present and show that they were together. Okay, and so it sounds funky, but I don't mean to be disrespectful, and that he would never mean disrespect. They love each other. That was in July.
And let me ask you, by the way, sorry, you were shown that and you found out that was the exact time she passed.
Correct.
Okay. Wow.
So now I'll just continue with this family. So now January, it was after Christmas. My daughter Brittany has two little ones, and her older one was a really rambunctious toddler, and she had a newborn. She said, "Ma, can I please?" We went to the Olive Garden in Manchester. She wanted to go to Taste by Spellbound to get some cookies and cupcakes. We were going somewhere, and I said, she goes, "Ma, can I just run in the bakery? Can you sit in the car?" I said, "Sure, but I got to call Andy." And she said, "Can you do it when I get out? Because sometimes the kids would get really noisy." And she goes, "Can I run in the?" I said, "Yeah, no problem." I said, she goes, "Why?" I said, "I want to make sure the twins got," because I had mailed them like little motorcycle Santa Claus shirts for the holiday, because it was the first one without their mom. And just want, how you just want to extend a little something. And I said I hadn't heard from him. So I called and I was doing Angie's probate stuff for her. I used to work at the probate court. So I was doing that for the kids. And so I said, I haven't heard from them in a while. And I went and I was in the car and all of a sudden Brittany went into the bakery and I get a message from the older son, "It's an emergency, please call me." I stepped out of the car, Andy had just died. You know, it's that knowing, that coming forward, that so, and with Angela passed.
Oh, Andy was her husband and he just died as well.
Yeah, they passed away within 6 or 7 months of each other. Very
Oh
sad.
my God. Okay.
But so it's that connection when um after Angie, actually, Dan passed December 20th, 2015. The week before, Shane and Brooke, my twins, were 17. He had gotten them cell phones. And so then, I mean, they're in high school, it's a week before Christmas, and they're playing on their cell phones. There's not a, they only had him for like, I don't even think a week before he passed away. So after he passed away, we went to, the kids wanted to go, like Shayna wanted to go to Virginia Beach and to go, we wanted to kind of repeat some things. And I know, I mean, it's our way of trying to deal with grief, to go somewhere familiar. And so he would always take her fishing there. There's a place you can get an out of state fishing license down there. It's some, I don't even know the name of it. And so we were trying to find it. And I said to Shane, I said, "Honey, why don't you just ask?" Because I stopped at 7-Eleven and the guy didn't know. And so I said, "Just ask your phone." Can't, because they had Siri, I think, back then. And she said, "Okay." And the phone answers back, "Okay, Papaya." What do you think Shayna's nickname for her father is? Papaya.
Papaya. That's amazing.
When the older son of Andy and Angela, Nick, his little one is a year and a half now. and I'll also be awoken and I'll hear and I'll see. So now her name is Angela. The baby's name is Angela. And I was awoken in the middle of the night, and they live in Ohio now. And well, they did when the baby was born. And so I'm meeting Nick and his girlfriend, the baby's mom, and the baby to be born. And I remember hearing "Mom, Mom," and I like woke up, and it was only Cole and I here. And I'm like,
And Cole
"What?"
is your son.
My son. And so he was about 14. He was sound asleep. And I heard "Mom," and I woke up, and I know better, like, but it's, you're kind of waiting and startling for a second. And I listened. I heard "Mom," and I wrote the time down. And at 5 in the morning, Nick called me and told me that Angie was born. Isn't that amazing? So it was Angela waking me at the same time that her granddaughter, her namesake, was born in Ohio. That I I it's so beautiful. Like when they come through like that clearly. My husband does it. I don't I'm just so blessed, and for myself it's very comforting, and that leads for others. Like, if there's so many beautiful in the moment, you're a little shocked by it, but it's comforting. My daughters, and I believe it's generational. I believe I'm fifth generation, so I didn't understand. It was
Fifth
never.
generation what? Like having abilities like this?
Yes. Oh yeah, my granddaughter. I show you the one about Dilly when she was talking to her grandfather? Did I send you that video?
Maybe, but I think you did, but tell everyone.
Okay, all right. So for me, I know it's my grandmother. My grandmother comes through with dimes. She always has since before. Um,
Meaning when you see dimes, that is her communicating.
Dimes. So coins, and a lot of people commonly get that. But what's really fun is to associate the year on the coin with the feeling, the intuit, what you're feeling as you find it, and it pretty much correlates. So my grandmother would always send dimes. My mother flatlined, had a heart attack. I, I'm not close to my family, meaning it's sad. I'm going to really be totally frank, and a lot of people that have struggles with immediate family and trying to identify, it's okay to understand it wasn't your doing, and it may be I believe everything's predetermined, and it's what journey I'm supposed to go through. Humanly, it makes it understandable, but it's still hard. So my mother had the heart attack. Nobody called me in the middle of the night. They called in the morning. I was leaving for work. Dan yells to me as I was running down the stairs. He said, "Your mom had a heart attack. She's in Hartford." I said, "What hospital?" He said, "They didn't tell me." I got in the car. I'm driving on 84, and I got that same presence again. Everything's going to be okay. Even though I was petrified, I got that same presence, that calming. I Dan calls me. He goes, "She's at St. Francis." I go to St. Francis. Now remember, the rest of them have been there all night, and I run in the room. And as I was going into the family waiting area, the surgeon hadn't come out yet, and all of a sudden, there's my family sitting there, and I run in, I said, "Where is she?" And walking out of the door, out pops my pediatrician for 30 years husband, goes, "Mrs. Freeman, your mommy's going to be okay. Come to me, come to me." And he holds me. I'm like, oh. So for me, that is the communication. And remember, I'm not understanding all of it as it's progressing, but that's the understanding, the reassurance, the knowing, um, that presence that's with me. I was petrified in the car, and I got the feeling of warmth around me, that everything is going to be okay. And then to have Dr. Sacchetti, I mean Dr. Vandana Sacchetti, she's in South Windsor now, but she's been my kid's pediatrician, and I own that child care center. To have her husband walk out randomly and save my mother's life and wrap me in his arms is amazing. And that knowing, always, that's what I mean about I'll know, and that presence is with me, and it's been with me my whole life. And as the traumas and the experiences and the blessings and the sorrows in my life and everything going, it's been a consistent. Now you get the shock of your my beloved husband suddenly passing beside me. Okay, that I was, whew. Now they stepped up even further. Like, they just stepped up as soon as Dan crossed. um I stayed at Brittany's house with Shayna Brooke and Cole, and she had Dylan, who was 6 months old at the time.
So you stayed right after he passed, you moved in with your adult kids and one of their children.
Correct. And her husband was there. It was at Brittany's house at the time. And so there were, do you remember the ornaments or did you ever see them where they'd have like the bird? Brittany got all the doves and all the birds, Christmas birds, and they're on like clothespins and you clip them onto the tree.
Yeah.
So, okay. So Brittany at the time before Dan passed, when I was pregnant with Cole, he had an estranged relationship with his parents. I mean, he loved them dearly, but so we went to the wake and we didn't bring any of the kids. She was not very kind. She came through. She came through spot on the first time I met Rebecca. Her, my father,
Okay, wait, I think you're gonna have to explain this. So who came through? And Rebecca, first of all, just so you guys know, is another psychic medium. She's a friend of both mine and Deborah's, and I have also done Instagram live and podcast episode with her.
she's amazing. She's her
Rebecca and Lo
she's
Cicero.
amazing.
Okay, so now I need the story clarified a little. So who came through? I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm confused.
When I was that's okay. I'll back up. When I was pregnant with Cole, and I if I lose track, redirect me here. When I was pregnant with Cole, Dan's mother passed away suddenly. So my husband and he hadn't spoken with her in a couple of years. It's just very sad. He loved his parents, but it was the same dysfunction. So, and it never changed. So we drive, our children don't come because she wasn't, I'll say politely nurturing to them. Okay. And so we chose to keep our children from that. And then, but the twins were 7. And then I had, um, then I had Brittany, she was 18. Then I had a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. So they stayed home. We drove to the wake. So, and it was far. So we drive to the wake and um, we called to check on the kids. And Brittany, I don't know if Brittany called us or we called her this time, but she was hysterical. She saw Barbara in the closet.
She saw her grandmother who had just passed away.
She saw her grandmother in the closet. She saw her. I said, "What was she doing?" She was standing there, Ma. I caught her for like 2 seconds and she looked calm and she just stood there, presented herself. And so Dan turns to me. Now we didn't understand this at the time. He goes, "Brittany just saw my mother in the closet. She said she's hysterical. Go call her." So he goes, "I think she's just very upset." Like I mean, he lost his mom, put aside that they weren't talking, but he'd still lost his mother. So I calmed her down and she was like, "Just don't stay out late." I said, "Okay." So that is how, she sees. And in this house where I am now, the people that originally built it, their last name was Love. Shayna, after Angie passed away, she was upstairs and I've got the clips of that too. There's spirit in this home. There's a male that is shown all the time here, which is pretty reassuring. My husband comes through all the time easily. My son-in-law was getting a little snippy at my daughter when they were vacationing when they came here, and I heard Brittany. You know how like married couples will be. Brittany lowers her voice and she says, "If my father was here, he wouldn't speak like that." And he goes, "Britt," and I'm trying not to get involved in their little early marital, little thing. And he goes, "I didn't speak to you poorly." And this man really has hardly ever raised his voice and has never said a cross swear word to her. But Brittany was my husband adored his children and she was frustrated. And so he turned and he said, "Well, what would your father do?" All of a sudden, all the lights and the TV went out in the room and then the lights came back on. And Brittany looked at him and he goes, "That's not funny. Did you turn the lights off?" She goes, "No." And I walked around the corner and I just said, "You know, you should be kinder to," I was teasing him. I said, "You should be kinder to our daughter." And he goes, "Uh-huh." And the lights flickered and the TV turned back on. That was just like, that one's pretty strong. That was a strong one. I had other ornaments up here. But so when we were at Brittany's house that night he passed away, we um I was out of my mind. But Britt was in the shower and she saw half a heart in the shower and she didn't, she had a 6-month-old baby. And so she like traced in the wall and on the shower, like where the water and the soap as you're washing yourself, she saw a heart come out, half a heart. And that night, and Brittany had bought toys for the baby. That night, all of us were sleeping in the living room and all the toys went on And she did put batteries in them, beforehand. So when because the baby was little, same time from being off, the the tree in the morning, and Brittany knew I was pretty pretty upset, and the twins were very, everybody was upset. She's got a husband and a baby, and she's trying to hold it together, being the oldest of the kids. And she she saw she saw something, she told me that night, and she just said, "Mom, I don't want to talk about it." So she didn't tell me when it happened. She told me later. But that morning, all the ornaments were flipped upside down. There was like, I don't know, she had a dozen of them or something. They were all flipped on the tree. And I thought, what? I thought they just probably top heavy or whatever, but I didn't put mind to it. And she said, "No, Mom." And then when Steve fixed them, they stayed until we took the tree down. I said, this was after the fact. I didn't know that this had happened. We were thinking other things. And it's just it's there's so many. So when Angie passed away, Shayna had a different cell phone.
And Shayna's your daughter. Just, I know there's a lot of names. I want to make sure all our listeners are able to keep track of everyone. And she's your friend who'd passed from breast cancer, and Shayna's your daughter.
Yep, yep, correct. And we were going to her celebration of life they were having for her, and Shayna was upset. She came downstairs. I said, "What's the matter?" I said, "You ready to go?" And she said, "Ma, I just got a friend request from Angie." I said, "Oh," and she wasn't friends with her, and she wanted to play like Words with Friends or something like that. And my mother, who has the only experience she's had with this, she doesn't have this experience, but her friend Marion passed away, and this was about 4 months ago. She's seen a lot of and experienced a lot with myself, and but she's older now, and she hadn't had experience and exposure to this. And she called me, and she has one of those old flip phones. She just had to stop doing it. You used to go and buy the card that you'd download for the 10 cents a day or whatever it costs. And so her friend Miriam passed away 4 years or 5 years ago. And they finally buried the woman's ashes in Connecticut. She had lived out of state. And there was a big family cadoodle. She went to go to the service in the graveyard. They buried the ashes, and she went. They always have like cake or something. They didn't have a big to do, and she went home. Now my mother's 80, going to be 81. She went home, and about 3 days after the fact, her phone. She turns her phone off to save the battery. Like she said, "Debbie, I just got a call from Miriam. It was a voice recording, say how she can't wait to get together with me, and she just misses me so much, and she's so grateful I'm her friend." I said, "What?" This woman had dementia before she passed away years ago. Isn't that amazing?
There is a phenomena, people talk about getting telephone calls and I believe texts as well from people who've passed away. There's a parapsychologist, Dr. Cal Cooper, who has written about that and researched it and wrote a book that unfortunately I think is really hard to get because it's currently out of print, Telephone Calls from the Dead, but follow it because I think he's trying to get it circled again, but it's apparently a thing.
Oh, definitely. It's I have one more that I'll share that I don't think a friend of mine will mind sharing. A friend of mine, um, this is amazing. So remember I said I knew, and I understand now that I knew Angie was both, as I identify, heaven and here. When I saw her, that wispy lifting, I knew she was in both, clearly. A friend of mine's young 20 something year old son passed away in a horrible automobile accident. And her mother was at the end stages of Alzheimer's. She was in a nursing home. She was completely, like, she was not coherent. And I don't think they had her sedated. I don't know, but she was more where she needed to go to her mother. When there's trauma in your life, she physically needed to go to her mother. So she went to her mother, and she said, "Mommy, Brennan died." And she was very, very upset. And so then they had the wake, and she went back to her mom, who was completely out of it, unconscious. And she, said, tomorrow we're going to bury him. And she put the prayer, the mask, they have the cards when you go to the wakes, you can pick up, I don't know what you call it, are they prayer cards or something? So what she had done was she had pinned it to her mother's pillow. And, she was crying, and she was so sad, and her husband and her went home. And I don't know if her daughter or other son was with her. And so when she had gotten home that night, a couple hours later, the nursing home called and said that her mother had crossed, and her mother was clutching the prayer card in her hands that was pinned to her pillow. Isn't that amazing? That, I mean, how comforting for that mother, for to comfort her adult daughter who lost her child. That is remarkable. A year after Dan had passed, and that was years ago. We had still owned the child care center then. So we sold in 2012. So that was probably I think he passed, I'd say 2009 or 10. Dan and Carol Ann grew up together, meaning the mother who lost her child and my husband, in East Hartford. They, we didn't socialize, but she brought her daughter, who was a lot younger from the boys, to the child care center. So now, after Dan had crossed, I'm driving home in stop and go traffic. It's about 3 years ago. And I heard mommy. And I was like, huh? And then I was alone in the car, and I was stop and go through Hartford, and I heard mommy, and I love you, mommy. And I heard that, and I'm thinking, why am I hearing that? And all of a sudden, the license plate in front of me in the car, you know how like when you're driving bumper to bumper, stop and go, you don't really see the car, it's not the distance. It said Brennan. And she had two boys, and I'm embarrassed to say, but I had forgotten the name of the child. And so anyhow, after Dan passed, I had a lot of stress. And so I called Britt, and she was in Vegas. I said, Brittany, which of the boys' names was the one that passed? I think somebody's talking to me. And she goes, Mom, it was Brennan. I said, oh. Now I hadn't spoke to her in so many years, and how do you say your son's saying hello and you don't say that, And I'm wondering why. So I waited, I jotted everything down, and I waited, and then I just approached her in a way, because she had sent me a sympathy for Dan. And I just said, I really wanted to reach out, and I really feel terrible I haven't reached out, in a proper way to say thank you. And so many people were kind to me when he passed suddenly. And I said, I find a lot of comfort in spirituality. I tried to open the door that way. I did not want to cause her 1 millisecond of trauma. So she said, No, Debbie, I've tried and I've tried. And I said, Oh, and she said, his birthday was just on. It was on the day he was coming through to me. I said, Well, can we get together for coffee? And I got together for coffee with her, and I shared with her, and that was his birthday when he was saying hello to her. Another friend of ours who passed, she passed 2 years ago, this March. She was so kind to me after Danny passed away, but I connected with her. Like I just connected, and that's what I mean about people placing themselves. And we were meeting, and I shared with her what I was hearing and seeing, and I kept repeating something to her in a month and a date, and she just looked at me, and it was safe. Do you understand how this in the beginning was all safe? How I was getting the validation of understanding and helping?
Safe? What do you mean? Like not
Safe meaning that I wasn't sharing it outright with people. I wasn't like it was spirit coming to me, reassuring me that I was hearing clearly, properly. It was okay to process it humanly. Do you know what I mean? In my head. You gotta remember, you gotta think. You go into Stop and Shop, and I'm standing behind a woman, and I hear cup of tea, cup of tea. I didn't understand grounding. I didn't understand boundaries. I didn't because this door was just like barn gates open big after Dan crossed. And so I would hear and see, and I was just thinking I was truthfully going a little bonkers. And as I went around, like at the deli, and I heard this woman, she picked up her cell phone. She goes, No, my grandmother would just love a cup of tea right now. I miss going and having tea with her. And I saw and heard the woman as I walked past her before the phone call. So I think they know that
Oh, you heard her say that, and then she said it out loud afterwards.
out loud into the phone. So I think this
After you heard it.
after I heard it, but why would I tell a stranger I'm hearing this? and seeing, and so eh, that was, so all of this is making it, I want to say, for me, okay, as I'm hearing and I'm seeing, and Deanna's just come through so much. But so I meet with this friend. She goes, Deb, let's go out once a month to get you out of the house. Even though I had kids and, busy, she's like, let's just get together, because she grew up with Danny. So it was nice. And she was 10 years older, I think 10 years older than me. And it was just nice to have that connection, because we don't have family connection. Don't forget, when you grieve someone and you don't have, you need to say their name out loud. You need to hear reassurance. You need to just, I don't want to say live in the presence, but don't live in grief, but it's you to validate for your heart, humanly, to just acknowledge them. It's so important for you as a person. And so it was just kind of her. So we met for the movies, and the first time we met for coffee, I kept hearing a lullaby, and I'm like, "Whew, I'm not going to share this then." And I didn't. She had never shared with me. I only knew she had at the time one child. And I repeated the date, the month, the lullaby. I said, I don't know why I'm hearing that. I said, this is what happens to me. And her eyes welled up with tears. She lost her first child. I even had his name. I never knew that. Do you understand how spirit also was like saying, "Oh boy, here's the straw, but let's help it ease her into this." And so these reassurances, this is going to be another one of knowing. And I don't know why I knew at the time. Dan's mother, remember I told you she had passed. It was years later, like 7 years later. And I am embarrassed to say this for my husband, but not because he did it at all. Not because of his brothers did it. His sisters did this. So I remember talking about something with Dan and his oldest brother. I won't mention his name. We're not close. And I said something, and I said, "Who has your mother?" Because the father's ashes are somewhere and we know where they are. And I said, "Who has your mother?" And so said, the sister did, because she took care of everything and the woman lived with her and stuff. And I said, oh, and I don't know why. Why would I say, "Who has your mother?" Right? Barbara was left on the in the funeral home for 8 years. The older brother had to go pay the rest of the thing to get her ashes back. I didn't at the time understand who was telling me, "Where's Barbara?" It's really, it's amazing. So with understand, so that's how the understanding came about. Then I was hearing, seeing, knowing, and then a grandmother from the child care center had said, um, she had reached out to me because I had a lot of clients. Don't forget, with the child care center in many years. And she reached out to me, and I just said thank you to her. And I don't know why I just unloaded everything on her. It was shortly after Dan crossed, and she said to me, "Okay." I said, "I think I'm going out of my mind." She goes, "I'm going to send you somewhere." She sent me to a wonderful woman, Deb Eldridge, out of Ellington, Connecticut, to go to a weekend course, because I knew I could always hear, see things, know things, but I didn't put it all together, but it was just bombarding me from everywhere. So I went to this course, and it just made sense. Like psychometry, the woman's like, "Bring something back tomorrow." I did two of the three envelopes at my table. I knew.
Wait, I don't think anyone here knows what psychometry is. That's when you take an object. Tell me if I'm wrong, Deborah, but you hold an object, like you might find like a second-hand necklace, or someone, if you're a psychic medium doing a reading, someone would bring in like their grandmother's necklace and not tell you what that is, and you'd hold it and get information from touching the object.
Oh yeah, like the first one of the examples was someone had put a key in the envelope. So it's easy to feel a key if you're holding the envelope. And I immediately quieted, and learning how to quiet myself, and learning and to understand, to listen within. We're all in my knowing, we are all of one source. We are all, so for me, as I go through different planes, here, heaven, somewhere else, that I always knew I was somewhere where my feet were very hot in sand. That's all. It's the only other plane that I identified as a child. And, well, I didn't understand it then. But so I held on to.
You mean in a past life you remembered being somewhere where your feet
No, I'm there
was hot
now. I
in
still
sand?
know I'm there now. I don't know more of it. I've always been there. So when I held this, I received the, and I quieted, because now remember, this is the first time at this weekend. It's like a smorgasbord. Like, this is psychometry. This is what tarot means. These are angel cards. This is mediumship. This is the difference between mediumship and psychic. This is that. This is spirit. People identify as spirit and soul, or this is live energy. This is energy that is eternal. So all of those things, it was like this big smart, and everything they did. So when I held the key, all of a sudden I got who lived there, who was I saw two people. I knew who they were. I saw two different months. I saw what color the house was, and I didn't understand all of it. And it was amazing to me, but I was like, okay, and we were to write the things down, and I think I wrote 15 things down and 13 of them were spot on. And that's that. So doing that, so going there, that helped me.
And this key belonged to another student in the class, right? And you'd never met the student before?
Yeah, they brought it from home. No, 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 you don't know who's what or where.
Does it feel different to you when you're getting the information through an object in psychometry versus when it just comes to you versus when you're doing a reading in person?
No, no, it doesn't. And no, it's all energy. It's eternal energy. When we were doing, remember we were at the expo with Rebecca?
Rebecca puts on an expo, Psychic Medium Expo, every summer, and that's where Deb and I first met.
So when I pulled into the to the parking garage, the guy that greeted me, his name tag was Dan. That's my husband's name. When somebody lost their keys, they had a Hershey's Park heart shape on them with the name Dan on the back. Like all of these
Hearts are your sign for Dan, right?
hearts, yep, but signs, symbols, synchronicity. So we were at the other expo, and we were in one of the other hotel, not at Mohegan Sun. This oh, I forget her name. She had this book, this astrology book. Do you remember when they gave the astrology book and I took it?
No.
The ladies, the I forget her name. She's really sweet. She used to be in Rebecca's Center before she closed. But so, anyways, so she's a Reiki master. So she's like, "Oh, does anybody want this book?" Her sister said, and I held on to it, and I said, "Sure, I'll take it." And I was playing with it, and every time I opened it up to something significant, a date. Well, I started handing it to somebody, and I said, "Give it a try," and they did it again, and then I started incorporating that as a tool, a modality in readings and explaining energy. So I there is no difference. It's an amazing I it's in the back of my car because I had done some private readings. I had done a group reading last week, and I'm going somewhere tomorrow. So I'm like, okay, I kept my stuff packed in the car, and I was there when I was walking this morning, and I said, "Oh, hi." I was talking to this book here, and I said, "Okay, let's see what kind of day we're going to have today." And I just whoop, opened it up, and it opened up to October 17th, which is Dan's birthday, which is pretty. It's like the thickness of an old Sears and Roebuck's or telephone book. It's really cool. So for me, no. Does it always work? I don't think so. But, for me, no. But when I touched that envelope, it was like boom, 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 boom. When I took a tarot class over at Priscilla's, I signed up in Melinda. You've met Melinda, right?
Yes, Melinda's another friend of Rebecca's who does psychic reading.
Okay. So these people are placed in our path, I believe, for a reason. I'll back up how I met Rebecca. Dan had passed away. It was in February or March. Brittany said to me, we used to own the child care center. Brittany said, and she used to get when things would be faxed, like the Funny Bone would fax over things so people that were turning 21 because they want to make money could bring 5 friends for free or 10 friends. Brittany and her husband had always been on that list because it's a comedy club and there's not a lot around here. And so Britt had gotten, Deanne crossed in December. Brittany had gotten a request because her birthday was in April to, reserve some for April. And she saw there was a medium on there. And she said, "Ma, you want to go to a medium?" And I said, "Yeah, but Cole was only 10 at the time." I said, "He can't go." She says, "They have to be 18." I said, "I have nobody to watch him." She goes, "Well, the twins can take him and walk around the mall. It's only for an hour." And I said, "Okay," because they were 17. And I said, "Okay." So we went. It was under Brittany's name. She had just bought the tickets. I do not look 18. I was 51 at the time. We picked our own seats. We sat down. and immediately I felt the energy between Rebecca and I. I'd never met her before. So the place was packed, and she came over and she described Dan to a T. She said, "There's somebody else here, and she's very proud of you." And which was opposite of Barbara.
And Barbara's Dan's mother who's passed.
That's right. She said she's so proud of you, what you've done with the children. But she described her, and I knew who she was. And then she said, "There's a man waiting with a red truck over there, a pickup truck waiting to leave with them. He's waving to you." My father was a firefighter, drove a red truck. She explained Dan to a T, and Barbara. There is no way that woman is I'll use the word, I don't know if they want to say gifted, enabled, entrusted. I consider mine to be entrusted. So that's how I met her. Now, she was placed in my path for a reason. Then, it extended further, and I had met her, but I didn't know of her. When I walked past, she had done like a fair at the Baymont or something earlier when Dan and I were staying there when we had moved out of state, and it was near Brittany's house. So, but I hadn't crossed paths. But these people are meant to be placed in your path for a reason. So I had taken a tarot class with Melinda at Priscilla's, and because it's in town here, it's right up the street. And I remember when I was like, how am I going to study all these cards? And I would pick up the cards and I would know what it meant. My granddaughter at the age of 2, the one that saw Dan and communicates with him, she could read tarot in a preschool way. So when we did our thing online on phone, I think readings, she had set up because I think it was the weather was snowy that night or something, and the people couldn't.
What does being able to read tarot in a preschool way mean?
Okay, it means that well, let me explain how I understand tarot, so then I'll explain how I understand her to do it. When you sit down, there's all these suits and all of this and that, and I'm like, oh my god, I have short-term memory. I'm never going to remember all this. And I remember Melinda patting me, going, "Just give it a whirl," and and all of a sudden it made sense to me. And when we did the readings, it went into a mediumship reading, and I went into her I looked at the cards. I never understood. I mean, I understood what the suits were, but I didn't know, like a lot of tarot readers will place it with astrological or signs and angels. Like they put it together, and that's too much for me. And I would, do either a cross, or I would do a before, before, present, future. I would do these little, we learned all these ways to lay the cards out. And so I was reading this woman, and it just went into a spot on mediumship, and she started crying, and I was seeing her grandmother and how she went grocery shopping with her, and I explained where she was born, next to her grandmother physically, and her grandmother was in the delivery room. I mean, it just went on so many things. And I looked at Melinda. She was okay. And I said, "Oh my God, did I go too far?" And she's like, "No, no, 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 no." And the woman was like, "No, thank you so much. I just got back together with my grandmother. We were estranged, and that's how we rebuilt our relationship. As I would take her grocery shopping." So for me, so then tarot and decks, Melinda told us, now this gets even further. She told us to wrap them, to bless them, to wrap them, to respect them, to sleep with them. And I thought, sleep with them. All right. So I stuck it under the mattress. I was game for anything. And it was crazy. And I had two of the same deck that I didn't realize I had bought, because I have about 10 or 12 decks now. And I had put it in the basket that I keep next to my bed. And I kept having these like vivid visitations. And I realized when I changed the sheets like 3 days later that I had left the deck under the bed. And I thought, what is that? That's a modality. That's a tool used. So when Dylan was she must have been about 3, and they'd always want to play with the cards, and I teach them to respect them, and this is what you do. And so she started to lift a card, and she'd look at it, and she would say, "She's so sad. Why is she sad?" Or she'd pick up the one that was the death card. And most people get frightened, and it means there's many different interpretations. It's for what the cards present for you, for me, as I read them. It could be change, it could be to complete. There's many different ways that it'll come about during reading. And she lifted up the death card, and she said, "Oh my, all done." I mean, for a 3-year-old. And it's just like, yeah, but she's the one who saw, like, so she did that since she was little, but we don't encourage it. We just, it's very matter of fact. And okay, they're very big on the hearts, because I get them all the time. we don't encourage and say, oh, how wonderful. Um, Dilly walked into the center with me at Priscilla's. And this is the time, like Brittany honestly said to me, Mom, okay, maybe we shouldn't take her there again. Because when I walked in and Dylan leaned over and she goes, she talks to so many people. They're all in the hallway. There was nobody in the hallway, just being in there. And I said, "Yeah, she does." That's all I said, because I had dropped something off or I'd picked something up to do some promotional stuff for her. But but I had just run in with her from the car, and brought her in with me. She was like 3 years old. She goes, she talks so I just said, yes, she does, because I didn't want to say, oh, what do you see? Or I don't want to do that to them. The little one um, definitely saw. And yeah, they kept waking her up. And Emmy was like, she was scared. And I said, Britt, why are you letting her watch? Thinking she's watching some cartoons or something that are scary. And Brittany's not like that. She won't let them watch that. But she said, I don't know, Ma. She was just freaking out in the middle of the night and they won't leave her alone. And they had melty faces, like they were all wet. And I talked to her because they call me Bam, and they were in Vegas at the time. And her name's Emmy. I said, Emmy, honey, what is the matter? I said, did you have a bad dream? And she's like, no, they wouldn't go away. And she's sassy. And I said, what? She goes, they kept scaring me, Bam. I said, well, you wake up and you have a bad dream, or anybody, you tell them you need your 9 nights. So the next night she wakes up, and Britt, the kids, she would sleep in bed with their parents. And so Brittany woke up like in a panic and she couldn't find her, and she saw her sleeping on the couch. And she's little, like this one's little, just barely 3 this age too, the younger one. And so Brittany said no, she was sound asleep. She woke up, we had breakfast, and she called me the next morning, and because I would talk to them all the time, I said, hi darling, how are you? And she said, "Ugh." She goes, I told them I was tired and they can't play in my house anymore, and they left. I said, oh. I flew out there the next week. We're at the beach at Santa Monica Pier, and so we're doing something. I'm taking pictures of the kids, but it was COVID time, and they were at the beach. And when I looked in my iPhone, you can see different silhouettes. And so I was, in the car. Steve was driving, and I was sitting between the girls in their car seats, and it was really funny. She goes, "See, they play with me all the time." I just looked at Brittany. I didn't say anything. Not cute, but they're unfiltered. They're just little. They're little, and I know they're accurate. When I say generationally, I know my grandmother. My grandmother. So when my mother had a flatline heart attack, in the hallway I saw a dime. Under my mother's intensive care bed there was a dime. And I find dimes all over the place. But after my husband passed suddenly, I went in to get his insulin. He was a diabetic, out of the refrigerator, and I opened the CVS bag and 2 dimes fell out. You know how they staple your prescription? But to have those there, a man fell at the gym a couple of weeks ago. He had Parkinson's. He got out of the jacuzzi, and after I swim, I get out of the jacuzzi to soak my mouth. I get in the jacuzzi, and you could tell like sometimes when they're just really shaking both their limbs and they're having a hard time. But he had gotten out to try to use one of the bathrooms, which is a shower bathroom, and he didn't get the door shut. So I jumped out of the jacuzzi and not looking. I said, "Sir, do you want me to shut that?" And he said, "Please." I shut the door. I got back to the jacuzzi. I heard a kaboom. And I got a man out of the pool because I figured he might be undressed, trying to go to the bathroom. So the man was bleeding all over the place. He helped him. I run upstairs. I get the attendant because there's no security downstairs at the pool. Afterwards, they say, "Could you please fill out an accident report?" And I was like, "Yep." I go up to this table and I go to fill it out, and there's a penny. I turn it over and it's a 2015. That's the year Dan passed. That's how very simple, if you settle yourself and So all of this unfolding, that's the unfolding part, the understanding. And then I went to mediumship certification classes with Priscilla, and then, being in the presence of, and it just opened up. And then I would volunteer, and another psychic lesson. I volunteered. I won't give her name. I didn't know, because it's again all these wonderful people presenting to me and spirit providing for me. And it's comforting to me, but it's also lifting me to my purpose. My purpose is to be present, to to lift someone to whatever they grasp as their own understanding. That's why I'm here. It's not to persuade, to influence, to do any of that. It's to be present for. So I do volunteer work. That's how I started. So the difference between the psychic, I started to somebody referred me to another person on a site. So you do online readings for practice and this and that. So this woman saw me reading, and she's pretty big and she's connected out of the country. So anyhow, so she had reached out and she asked people to meditate, and a friend of hers daughter was missing. I meditated. I didn't get anything. I communicated back, private messenger. I didn't get anything. A week later, I was thinking about her. She had reached out again, saying there wasn't an update. And so I meditated again, and I saw a street sign. I saw the young girl. I saw a couple other people. I saw this. I saw that. I saw that. So I texted her back and I told her what I had gotten, and I just said, this is what I meditated a second time, and this is what came through. She got back to me. The family is so grateful. They found her alive. I knew she was alive. I was the only one that had her alive. I don't know how many people she reached out to, but I had the young girl alive. I knew where she was. The street sign was really the park in Paris where she was located. That was a big wowzy. And to me, I was so grateful that a child, because I have had trauma with one of my kids, I was so grateful a child was safe. And I heard that's not the lesson. The lesson for me, humanly, yes, I was so grateful. The lesson for me was to understand psychic energy that is live energy here on this plane versus there. Much difference.
How does it feel different?
How does it feel different when I sit down for a reading?
This is when you're reading a person psychically who has not passed away.
Correct. It feels different. I can see auras. I can feel around the person. I'll ask permission to blend. That to me, because I don't want to humanly think ever, that to me is where I settle in. I'll ask permission and I'll feel in it like I feel a physical exchange. I can feel the energy different. And when I do a reading, I'm blending and I'm being available for energy to come through. It's a different feeling for me. And so that's the only way I can explain how it feels different for me. So, in other words, I'm in it with the person. And when I'm a conduit, I'm not in it. I'm the connector between the two.
And the conduit means being a medium, reading someone who's passed.
Yes. And it'll start to blend. And when I go to do a mediumship reading, I ask permission to blend energy with the sitter, the person coming for the reading. I also will feel a vibrational level, and it's a I sink down like I feel like a sinking level, like a settling. And I say prayers of gratitude before I do it in the highest and best. I don't I don't predict. I don't another one other way that I didn't understand, and I have to be very careful with this one. I was referred to go to a reading after Dan passed away, but I didn't get there that first year as my pediatrician secretary. The next year, the pediatrician said to me, "Oh, did you?" The secretary said, "Oh, did you go?" And I said, "No, I didn't get her number, and I don't know why." So I got the number. As soon as the woman gave me the number, I went home and I sat there and I placed a call to do a reading. I went in. I placed the call. We were playing telephone tag. And every time I heard the woman's voice on the phone, on the answering machine, it's something felt like, 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 like warm but tight. And so then when I was talking to her, I started to see visions. And she had said something to me. I said something to her. I said, well, truthfully, because she was asking me if I understood, if I ever been read. And I said, well, I want to be really honest. Yes. And I do get signs and messages, and I don't do this for a living. But she said to me, do you have something for me? This is on the phone. I've never met this woman. I described what she looked like, what she was wearing. I then saw her with a younger boy. I gave a month, I gave a date. I didn't see the child growing. Her nephew had crossed at that age in that month. She was supposed to go pick, I think she said strawberries, but it had changed to blueberries. I saw her carrying a basket of blueberries. And then I had said something else. And she said something, oh, well, I'm sorry I had to call you from the car. I just spoke to my son's oncologist. And I just knew. Well, we were just making the appointment for, but her nephew came through that had passed of cancer. I saw something else. I did not repeat it to her, and I knew, and this woman's son passed away the following year. So for me, that was, I just knew. And even though I hadn't, it was too early, I hadn't gone to those classes and learned like boundaries and ethics and grounding. And I just knew as a mom not to say something, you know? And when I went to go to the reading for her, I had gone, and when she had said oncologist, and kids were her son was my twins' age, and I was getting Cola's camp stuff, and I bought a blanket, and I had bought her a gift, and I just felt like this to nurture her, and we're still friends to this day. That was such a trust. It was a trust not from her, but from spirit and God to me, as I understood it, and it was hopefully a comfort for her. To her, we have never spoken of knowing, either of us, and I there would be no reason. And I look back, and that was such a humongous ethical importance and trust and understanding for me as I go forward. The biggest ethic is to never, of course not intentionally, but never even unintentionally cause harm. And that, yeah, I knew, I saw that her son was very ill and that he wasn't going to continue. But I didn't trust that. And I'm thinking, why am I thinking that? The same thing as the dentist, remember years ago? So this I look at it as a trust. I look at it as I'm supposed to step forward and do my best for everyone. And also, it's true to myself. It's honoring spirit, it's honoring God, and it ascends my soul higher to its purpose. Why do people understand and see, and why people don't? It's just not in their journey ascension yet. We are surrounded by eternal energy, life, source, God, the heavens, and there's a purpose for all of this. And I think that this will be a blink when we look back. I think when you and I are up there and you're meeting my husband in that, whatever, like when we shed our humanness, that's another whole podcast. We're all going to know.
Thank you so much for coming on and for your time. This was such a fun conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Do you want to let the listeners know where they can find you?
Sure. I don't have a website yet, but they can find me at my email. And I do not offer, I've been bombarded. I can't offer free readings. I can offer, if somebody has a question, I don't mind answering a question for something. I do a free workshop in Glastonbury, Connecticut. It'll be under Glastonbury Friends and Neighbor Facebook page. End of each class, I'll do a little platform mediumship, meaning walking around and giving message, small messages. So my email is one long word. It's affirmationswhearts@gmail.com. I have a psychic medium widow/widowers Facebook page. And it's just anybody's more than welcome. I do private. I won't reread within 6 months of a reading. I never want to humanly be in the presence, like be there, and I don't want to recall a thing. If you reach out for a reading, just give me your first name. Don't tell me one thing. So if you reach out, you just send, I'm interested in a reading. I'll send you 3 dates, 3 times. I only do up to 2 to 3 readings a day, 3 times a week. I do private. I do in-home parties. I do events.
And you can make a fake email just for this. Just
Definitely call me on a burner phone. I don't care. I do Zoom, I'll do FaceTime. I'll come. I'm COVID safe. I have 2 boosters. I will be masked if we're indoors. There's no deposit given. People pay me when it's done, and I don't want to know anything about anybody. Nothing. Zip boom. All right. Thank you to your listeners so very much, and take care.
to get more information on what the fuck just happened, to get updates on when the book launches, download Grief Bingo, and more, go to WTFJustHappened.net, check us out, and subscribe to our newsletter. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if you've had any crazy what the fucks yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hi, reach out either on Instagram at WTF underscore just underscore happened underscore, or email me at hello@wtfjusthappened.net. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder what the fuck just happened.